The term realism seems to pop up a lot in creative media nowadays, but why do audiences want it? And how does it compare to when media is grounded? In this video, I'll explain just that. So get comfy everyone, because this one should be interesting. Firstly though, what do these terms actually mean? What does it mean for a piece of media to be realistic or grounded? For creative media, realism is the choice to make its characters, worlds or plot lines as intrinsically akin to the real world as possible. The audience should feel a relatable connection to what they watch or read through its link to what we know from our lives. Grounded media is on a similar wavelength. It makes the worlds more relatable to the audience, but through character motives and the restrictions of the world that the writer has set up. The characters, environments and stories should only abide by the rules that the fictional world has, and not our own. This is where most fictional media sits, as, to tell their stories, they need the flexibility and realism. It's important to note that realism does not mean that the film's events are based in reality. Realism is only a style, and a fictional story can be told through realistic settings. At its core, realistic media is intrinsically grounded, as the events keep the rules of a realistic world. But grounded media is not necessarily realistic. We'll come back to that. To know why realism is so common in modern media, we have to go back. Way back. Picture this, it's 1848 in the midst of the French Revolution, and realism is just starting to appear. It began as a backlash to romanticised artwork, which focused on the idealisation of the world, where it instead looked to depict the unpolished, unglamorous real world. Realists describe this style as the truth, which in turn makes anything fictional be considered lies by comparison. This trend was continued into the comedy of the time, where comedians like Mark Twain in 1866 would tell monologues about everyday life. But at the time, and through to the turn of the 20th century, comedy was still broadly costume character-based, with slapstick, lewd and stereotype humour as the standard. Vaudevillian Charlie Case changed this though, pioneering a new style similar to that of Mark Twain, but now without props or costumes. This allowed the comedy to feel much more like a commentary on real life over a fantasised version. This was then followed by an introduction to observational comedy. Comedians like David Brenner, George Carlin and especially Jerry Seinfeld led to new ventures like Saturday Night Live, where Seinfeld and co-stars like Norm Macdonald and Bill Murray would make jokes out of current events and people you may meet in real life, continuing this trend of realism in widely received media. But this could also be seen in film as well. The Blair Witch Project made waves in the horror genre, sparking new subgenres like found footage films, prioritising realistic fears like being lost in the woods or chasing a ghost story. Similarly, science fiction was impacted as well. Films like Gravity and Interstellar felt real in their approach, even when having very fictional stories. Having the science of those worlds be based in real-life theories and facts meant that the stakes were much more real when Sandra Bullock had to jump from one space station to another with only a spacesuit to protect her. I read an article from Chris Winkle on the Mythcrants website about why realism is so toxic to fiction, where she shares some very strong views about how American university courses treat realism. She writes how fiction is taught as an imitation of reality, but how that isn't giving art enough credit, because imitations inherently fall short of what we wish them to be. Creative media should be able to stand alone from its source material, not to imitate, but to evoke the thoughts and feelings the creator wants to convey. It can also be exploitative and predatory of writers, as they are consistently told to write what you know, which may push them to share their personal trauma. But realism does have its uses. It can make dialogue feel more refined and smooth, although that does require filtering out the false starts and filler words that crop up in natural speech. It can also help to give real consequences to a character's actions. You don't want them to just shrug off a bullet wound, but I have read far too many essays for one video. How useful is realism anyway? Well, it makes your media more relatable. The obvious choice is when you're making media based on true events, as the realistic style helps to fit closer to what actually happened. This will allow you to employ more relatability into the emotion of your work, where audiences can resonate more with the characters because they're going through something that actually happened to someone. Realism can also be used in fictional settings, like horror writing. If you're writing a piece where the threat is human, keeping the world they reside in realistic allows for the tone to be darker. Audiences relate to the protagonists, and can imagine the events happening to themselves, making the media scarier. Realistic media is grounded, as it follows the rules of the real world. But how is grounding media useful in other genres? Well, it allows for your work to more effectively convey the emotional weight of the stakes in a scene. Grounding a piece of media can help in writing a historically based piece of fiction. By setting your story in a world from the past, even in fantasy, abiding by the rules of that world makes the events seem more real. This makes the events your characters go through feel more real and impactful, as we can see the limitations or freedoms of the world they live in, and how that impacts their choices in the story. It can also help in horror writing. If you plan on including a fictional creature, creating limitations for it will allow there to be more powerful stakes. This way, the creature cannot find a way around any problem by the writer just inventing a new solution. It has to use its pre-established abilities to its advantage. This can make the events scarier, as it can show the creature to be smarter than the audience had thought, through it thinking of a solution to a problem. But what if you didn't want to use a realistic or grounded approach? Comedies have outlined this pretty well, stretching back to early cinema of the 19th century. Comedians like Oliver Hardy and Charlie Chaplin commonly made slapstick films, meaning prioritising humorous actions over the character's wittiness. These films would often have a basis in reality, but as the film went on, they would begin to get more fantastical in the events that happened. This approach of stretching the possibilities of the world the film takes place in has continued in horror, where the writer can use it to make the antagonist more frightful. By setting up a problem where the villain has no logical way around it, only for them to then break the rules of the world that's been set up, allows for the events to feel even more unpredictable and frightening. Knowing whether realistic or grounded approaches would work better in your work is completely subjective. That being said, we can say that one has more use cases. Realistic media is very important to making a story accurate to real events or adding a relatable tone. It makes your story have a close connection to the audience, as it can make overt statements on the world for your viewers or readers to think about. Grounded media is used much more broadly, however. It can allow for your story to effectively convey the emotional stakes in a scene, as well as making the character's motivations feel more likely and not over the top. Overall, grounding your story in the rules and limitations of its own world can make an audience resonate with it more. It also covers all genres and styles, even realism too. With more possible use cases, it makes sense that grounded media would be the preferred style. But as we have found out through the history of realism, it generally depends on the writer's and audience's needs at the time. And also, as we've seen, you don't actually need to use either. It really just depends on the story you're trying to tell and the characters you want to write. And that's that. Thank you for watching. Remember, I'm not a professional. This is just what I've learned through studying writing and filmmaking on my own, so take everything I say with a pinch of salt. Now then, leave. Now then, I have things to do, so this is the part where you click off the video. You can go. I mean, I'm not stopping you. There's no more. I don't know what you're waiting for. Go.